Afternoon, everyone. Great to be here and to be talking to you. I thought I should take a minute or two to sort of credentialize why you should be spending time here, going through the content that we are going to go through over the next about 10 or 15 minutes while we get started. Bain, for those of you who've not been aware of it, has had a bit of a ringside seat as far as GenAI is concerned, AI is concerned over the last few years. Given our early involvement with OpenAI, we were the people who worked on their enterprise strategy, got things together for them at that point in time, and were super excited by the technology. Subsequently, we've been involved in close to about 450 odd builds where we've taken organizations from concept through to production. I've personally been involved in close to about 30 plus of these builds in the region. And hence, what you'll hear from us is a little more of a point of view on what it takes to get an organization through to production, what it takes for actual scaling up of these systems. How do you sort of separate the hype of what's out there in the market to the reality of what can be done right now? And what we wanted to do was introduce this with a very quick view on the way we are seeing the AI evolution happen. For those of you who've been in the space, nothing that I'm calling out here is a surprise. I mean, we started out with traditional AI that's been working on everything that's deterministic over a period of time. Moved on to GenAI in the 21 to 24 period. Actually, the work there started perhaps another decade back, but it culminated in all the effort that happened around the GenAI space for those 3 or 4 years. And then we are starting to hear more about agentic AI right now. What these phases are doing distinctly are giving us capabilities that we did not have in the previous phase. If I were to sort of place this in perspective, the first phase basically gave us the ability to work with deterministic data for deterministic outcomes and gave us a lot of capability to look at information and structured information in a very productive way. The second phase with GenAI basically let us look at non-deterministic outcomes and with unstructured data in a much better way, producing content, looking at new things that we could do. What agentic AI is now bringing all of it together in also bringing capabilities that can span a workflow to look at what, for example, AI agents with autonomy can do. So what it's doing beyond the phase that GenAI gave us is autonomy. It is giving us the ability, for instance, to work by itself on a set of information that it holds and better itself over a period of time. And in that sense, gives us a lot more of agency compared to earlier phases that we had in play. With that as context, what I wanted to do was consolidate the discussion today into 6 topics that I wanted to talk to you about. What enterprises at this point in time, in terms of perspectives on AI, are thinking about and what it means for them. The first part of what I wanted to talk about is related to the way organizations are looking at this as a transformation, and then each of these topics will sort of layer on the messages there. Let me start with the first one, which is to talk about the whole theme of a multi-year transformation and what's playing out there. The first part of what's playing out is most organizations are looking at AI in different phases. So look at, for example, 2023 as the phase when we actually had experimentation on. There was conviction that you could actually get some potential applications developed. There were themes around what you could do as a long list of use cases. There were a bunch of POCs that were put out, and organizations got into the play, largely looking at these POC-driven approaches to look at proving out what the technology could do. 2024, there was a little bit of a view around early scaling, and that has meant, for example, the fact that they are starting to look at a few more select use cases and looking at trying to see what they could, for example, use to bank value. I like the way, for example, Dell articulated it in their CTO's podcast recently, where they talked about the fact that they started with about 800 use cases when they got to the first phase. And then they brought it down to about 8 of them that they thought would give them business value in a shorter period of time. And that was the shift where they started looking, most organizations started looking at where they could bank the value. The third phase that's playing out as we speak is centering around agentic AI and is largely revolving around what you can do to business processes as a consequence of this technology. For example, as we speak, We are working with large insurance organizations. We are working with banks. We are working with manufacturing organizations, where we are looking at processes end to end and looking at what can be done to shorten the process that's associated with their major flows, and to look at what can be done by way of efficiency there. We've looked at core processes like sales, like recruitment, and we are able to see that there is more than a 60-70% reduction in time involved. At the same time, a productivity increase of close to about 3 or 4x that you can bring in. So we are not talking about trivial changes that can happen in flows, but we are talking about substantial shifts that can happen in the way organizations are looking at processes 2025 and beyond. And this, we think, is fundamentally defining the way organizations can put their strategy around the transformation journey that they can look at with AI. And 2025 on, we almost think about this as a period when AI will play a role that's beyond what traditional RPA did. Think of this as RPA on steroids, with the ability to be able to work almost in isolation, almost as autonomous agents to do what people are doing, assisting them to be way more productive than they could ever be. The second part of what's playing out is this whole theme of what we talked about as big bets. I talked about the fact that organizations are starting to look at big bets. These are basically translating into 4 broad themes. One is business use cases that can have material business impact on them. So these are not edge use cases where you're trying to use, let's say, GPT for writing a mail, or you're trying to use a large language model to generate a piece of content. What you are doing instead is trying to take something that has tremendous business value and trying to see if you can actually institutionalize this. For example, we've worked with processes like procurement with organizations where we've banked close to about a 3-4% saving on already what is a large base of saving that they have in play. So for organizations that have close to about $1 billion of spend, we've actually seen they have the ability to bank close to about $50-60 million of additional value in a short period of time using the capabilities that AI can give. And these are the kind of use cases that make a difference. We've started using this in areas where, for example, we are putting this as a front-end tool that's available to, let's say, relationship managers on the wealth side. And we are starting to see that give a tremendous amount of value, almost increasing productivity by 50%, almost increasing the amount of leverage, the number of customers that these wealth managers can handle by about 1.5 to 2x. We are seeing them use this for strategic differentiation where, for example, if there's a way in which you, let's say, have a process that's running for about 10 days to resolve a customer complaint. We are talking to a client who wants to be able to resolve this in an hour, and we think it's tangibly something that is doable in the agentic framework. Now, a reduction of a 10-day process of a customer complaint resolution into something that's about 9 days is not huge value, but to be able to substantially shift it and bring it to about a half an hour or an hour is something that gives them strategic value and differentiation. And that, I think, is a big part of what's playing out. The third part of what is going on is to look at this as processes that you can simplify. Again, the idea is not to take existing processes and overlay digital on top of them, but to look at what could, for example, play out with lower number of touch points. What you would do, say, for example, in an insurance claim process, to let this run as a process that uses human in the loop, but uses AI agents to actually make the process run a little faster, and as a consequence, give you a lot more. And we are using this for scalability across functions and geographies. And I've given you a few examples of the way this works. For example, in contact centers, for example, in personalized marketing, for instance, in sales automation, for creating collateral, etc., in claims automation, and so on. What this means is, as a third message, we believe that as you look at these processes over a period of time using AI, we think it will move from human processes that took a certain amount of time to human in the loop processes to human curated processes that will give you a substantial amount of lift and a huge amount of leverage. And we believe that the substantial amount of saving that we are talking about is not a 20-30% change, but like a 2x or a 4x change that you can make in people productivity and in the amount of time that you're taking to run some of these processes. It's worth looking at the way, as a fourth message, how organizations are trying to get these initiatives going, just given the context of the fact that this is playing out in two different places. One is a place where you are building applications that requires a certain amount of governance, it's requiring a certain amount of curation, a certain amount of structured capability. And what this is giving us is also a bunch of capability on the other side with tools like a ChatGPT or a Gemini, which are able to give you, through deep research capabilities, a power user that we never saw before. So this whole concept of what we call a lab and a crowd is something that's starting to play out. The lab is basically focusing on creating some of these products in a structured way with high governance and with technical capability, whereas the crowd is largely taking forward use cases that might have lighter touch, simpler ability to put products together. A lot more of what we are starting to call vibe coding, to be able to put simple constructs that can actually create a power user group unlike what an organization has ever seen in the past. The fourth part of what we wanted to talk about is that organizations are starting to also redesign their processes for the fact that consumer adoption of agents will happen in a big way. It's paradoxical, but it's worth pointing out that we did a recent piece of work where we were looking at the web artifacts of a large organization. And we thought about the way these artifacts will be used in the past versus the way they'll be used in the future. In the past, largely humans looked at these. You and I would look at these websites and we would compare it. Whereas in the future, it's likely that there'll be more agents looking at this. So as we looked at this, we found that parts of their business that had more complexity, that had built more layers of complexity around the way they presented data, seemed to be less accessible to the agents compared to the parts that were accessible with simple data. So the reality is a lot of our web for consumers today has been built on the basis of what we think is built for the human eye rather than built for an agent or an AI agent that's actually coming and crawling for data. And as a consequence, we believe there's a lot of change that has to happen in the way organizations will need to think about it and prepare for these slew of agents that will come in. And this is a big part of what we think will need to be thought about, including rate limiters like the CAPTCHAs, the ability to present information, the ability to look at new bottlenecks that will develop in the organization as a consequence of everything that we are seeing play out, and the way to constructively trying to destroy some of these rate limiters and bring in scalability. So with all of this, I wanted to bring this together into a couple of simple messages, consolidating the 6 lessons that we talked about into a few tips that we think are still worth thinking about. For those of you who are already in the play at an enterprise level, the clear message is, please continue the AI push. Look at experimenting, because to an extent, a lot of what we're seeing playing out is the productionizing capability depends on the organization's ability to experiment and look at how these capabilities play out in reality and what's the best way you can actually incorporate them into your product offerings. The second part of what we'll need to that you'll need to start thinking about is building agents. And by the way, when you look at building AI agents, thinking about how you want to pilot, how you want to iterate faster and build these is going to be important. The third lesson is fundamentally to set up the foundations, and these might mean data foundations as well as technology foundations that you need to put in place. The last 2 lessons are related more to people, and the way I point this out is in any of the builds that I've been working on, I've possibly seen technology play about a 40-50% role, and the change management related to people within an organization play the remaining role. So as a consequence, let's not trivialize the change management that's needed. So start involving people as creators, start involving the human relationships team in the process, and making sure that they are involved in everything that's related to people transformation. That sort of consolidates everything that we wanted to say. Thanks a lot for your time today. And hopefully these 6 lessons are things that will be useful to you as you're thinking about your journey and the way you want to take your AI processes forward. Thank you.